Remember how in my last review for Dog's Life on PS2, I lamented about covering two kids games in a row? Well, I'm still living a sad, somewhat directionless existence, and today we're going for number 3. First, I was a rhino thing, then I was a snarky dog with rambling inner monologues, and now I'm a child wearing pajamas. Somewhat confusing and poignant undertones aside, I'm surprised by the constant discovery of 3D platformers on the PlayStation 1. It's a favourite genre of mine, and I just can't help myself when I find one. 40 Winks was a departure for Eurocom, whose business at the time was mostly dedicated to ports and licensed games. Reading the literature of the time, it certainly seems that a lot of effort was put into this original IP, based around dream worlds. Sadly, critical reviews at the time weren't so favourable, but looking back in the 2020s, there is a game here that just might be worth playing. I'll, of course, get into the how and why throughout this review, but the cancelled N64 version, which was reportedly almost finished, smashed a Kickstarter goal to finally bring it to release in 2019. It's obvious the interest was there. It was so complete that even the NTSC PS1 version had a quote from the Nintendo official magazine on the cover. Move over, Mario. Yeah, okay, it's not that good, but it shows how close to completion it was if an official Nintendo publication has words to say about it. And it's amusing that they still decided to print that on the PlayStation cover. Remember when bedtime as a child was the worst part of the day? 40 Winks cashes in on that idea, which is somewhat endearing since, as an adult, it's sometimes the best part of the day. The story follows two twins named Rough and Tumble. I can't imagine the sort of hippie commune their parents originated from to come up with names like that, but for the kids, bedtime sucks. To get them to go to sleep so she can likely relieve the smoke-based fun times of her formative hippie days, the mum comes up with a fantastical story to convince them to go to sleep and get out of her hair. There are these creatures called Winks, whose purpose is to look after you while you snooze, ensuring you have fun-filled dreams with chocolate rivers and gumdrop smiles. However, there is a sinister old git named Nightcap who is so tired he can't sleep. Jealous of everyone else's happy snooze time, he spitefully kidnaps Winks and transforms them into Hoodwinks. Hoodwinks change dreams into nightmares, and since so many of them have been transformed, only 40 Winks remain. So, playing as either Rough or Tumble, the goal is to save all the Winks over several different dream worlds from Nightcap and his henchman, Fredbear. The choice of either Rough or Tumble is one you should consider too, since you'll be stuck with them for the rest of the game. I chose Rough, but since I can't be bothered playing the entire game again, that's all you'll see for this review. For what it's worth, I couldn't find any indication that they played any differently. I did notice that certain areas were only open to either Rough or Tumble, but these just seem to be rooms full of collectibles and don't change how the game is played. The levels are connected by a series of hub worlds, starting with your house. Certain rooms are locked until boss fights are fought, with each room revealing a teleporter that transports you to another hub world for each area. The world's areas are based around nightmares, water, space, pirates, and the Jurassic and medieval periods. These contain teleporters to each level, but also races if you can successfully bop the one enemy flying around. These levels are full of collectibles, and if you win the race, you get to keep anything you collected while racing. These are surprisingly hard, and are certainly a difficulty spike compared to the usual casual gameplay. Probably a good thing that they're not mandatory then, considering the age range that would have originally played this game. The aim of each level is to find cogs, dream keys, and of course the Winks themselves, of whom several are kept captive in each level. You'll need to collect every cog you find too, since they're used to unlock progress points throughout the level. These can be found simply floating around, or in chests. There are also 4 dream keys per level, and these are ultimately used to unlock the boss fights at the end of each area. You can exit the level once you just find the Winks, but without those dream keys, you won't be able to progress to the next portion of the game. So, it's very important that you search every nook and cranny of the environments as you play, as it's a huge pain in the butt to backtrack through an empty level once you realise you're missing one. The environments can be a bit on the boring side too. Sure, they look great, but they are lacking substance. Besides from the barrage of enemies you'll constantly encounter, there's not much else to do. There is the odd barrel or crate you need to push if you can't jump high enough, and switches to find that activate locked doors or other obstructions, but overall, a bit more interaction would have been nice. Otherwise, besides from searching behind every corner looking for the dream keys, a large portion of the game is spent fighting enemies. It's kind of funny how at the start of each level there will be a dialogue box of an enemy specific to that level trash talking you and going on about your impending doom, and then 10 seconds later you discover them and bop them into the year 2000. But otherwise, it's a constant barrage as you traverse the levels. I don't have any real complaints about them though. They're varied enough and do require different types of attacks to keep you on your toes. These attacks consist of a typical punch, a slide attack, a Mario-style thump from above, and also a scream, which is essentially a projectile. Moons are collected to fund the screams, so be sure to keep accumulating them as you go to keep stocked up. There are also Zs to collect which represent your health. The more you have of these, the deeper in sleep you'll be. Run out and you'll wake up, meaning nightcap wins and sweet dreams are cancelled. However, the enemies are not exactly smart. Their strategy is just to bum rush you no matter what attack you're spitting out. Rarely will they ever overpower you, and if you just keep attacking, they won't be able to get a punch in. I also noticed a few bugs here and there involving the enemy AI walking into walls or other geometry and getting stuck. Since so much love and care was supposedly put into development, you'd think glitches like that would be completely absent. At the end of each world, there is a boss fight with Fredbear. I found these to be quite good, if a bit on the simple side, but I guess it is a kid's game. Regardless, like all good boss fights, they are laid out like a puzzle. There's a certain aspect of the fight you'll have to figure out to defeat him, as it seems impossible otherwise, and I've always liked that. Boss fights where the enemy is simply more powerful than what's usually encountered is a bit lazy in my eyes, and seems to be the case for most modern games. But anyway, back to 1999. One thing of note that you can do in 40 Winks is temporarily transform from a sleepy kid in pajamas to something a bit more dream-worthy. These costumes, if you will, consist of a ninja, a caveman, a jester, and a superhero robot man thing. These offer more powerful attacks, the ability to jump higher depending on the costume, meaning you won't need to push around crates, and access to certain areas. The caveman can even break ground with his fat ass at certain points, although the slight cracks in the ground can be hard to spot because of how the environments are drawn. Otherwise, the platforming isn't horrible, costume or not. Jumping can seem slightly floaty over large distances, but for the most part, controlling rough or tumble doesn't invoke too much rage. That is except for the swimming portions. The scrounge of platformers from this era. Swimming is annoying because there are no dedicated buttons to move up or down. The circle button is used to dive, which is fine, but once you're underwater, only X is used to accelerate movement. Using the analog stick to steer in all directions is just too much of a hassle. In an ideal world, the stick would be used to move, with X and circle used as dedicated buttons to move up and down. It just makes more sense and would feel more natural. What's also annoying is that if you try and jump out of the water onto a ledge but miss, you'll automatically dive on re-entering the water. You then fight with the broken system to resurface again, and if you keep missing the ledge, it gets old really quick. You've got to wonder how many players gave up on this game during the Second World, since it's primarily based around swimming. And while I'm whinging, the camera. Yes, I know it seems unfair to criticize a third-person game from the late 90s for its camera, since that was par for the course back then, but I was thrown into a false sense of security. My early notes while playing actually commended the game's camera, but the further into the game I got, the more corridor-like it became, and the camera just fell to bits. A lot of the time it would face the completely wrong direction, and I'd be running blindly into who knows what. Having said that, there is a nice feeling of progression as you play. The environments are varied enough, and you hardly ever feel like you're looking for a direction to go. It feels flowy, and the game does a great job of directing you. As for physical progression, there are a reasonable number of checkpoints throughout each level. You can only save between levels once you're back in a hub world, but this isn't too unreasonable since most levels only go for 20 minutes. 40 Winks is a great looking game. Not only are the character models detailed and well designed, but the environments as a whole are also a delight to look at and explore. The warping effect the PS1's graphics are known for are used to the game's advantage here, since the environments are so wacky and dreamlike in the first place. There's also a tasteful selection of particle effects and mood lighting used, which plays on the whole Twilight vibe well. But the sound isn't so special. It's not bad by any means, and there are some highlights like the mumbling clock, or the fact that the music gets drowned out while swimming, but otherwise, it's unremarkable. The music is repetitive and maybe even a bit too childish. So, Is 40 Winks as bad as original reviews stated? No, I don't think so. It's not a great game, but I think I would have enjoyed this back in the day. Heck, I enjoyed it now. Gameplay wasn't frustrating, and certain combat situations like the boss fights were actually quite fun. The environments are a treat to be in too, and I'm sure I would have found them quite memorable. But ultimately, it could be argued there are valid reasons to necessitate cancelling a mostly complete N64 version since it sold so badly. That may seem a bit extreme, but money does talk. The costs of cartridge production compared to discs would have been a deciding factor, I'm sure. But if you are a fan of cutesy 3D platformers, especially those on the PS1 and N64, I would recommend giving 40 Winks a whirl. Just don't pay too much.